How are you, man? I'm Gil Roth, and you're listening to a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. This is a COVID check-in episode where I record with a past guest of the podcast to find out how they're holding up during the pandemic. As far as how I'm doing, everything's okay. Sorry for the cough, allergies, etc. Busy day yesterday with work, conversations with our lobbying firm, and some with my trade association member companies and other people who have questions about where things are going, at least in terms of the pharmaceutical manufacturing and government relations stuff that I seem to be involved in. Also, almost finished the novel I started over the weekend. I'll finish that this afternoon or this evening, I'm sure. Watched some Cheers reruns, got to bed pretty early. I also got to talk to Henry Wessells, and you get to hear it. Henry is a rare book dealer, author, editor, and snappy dresser. We recorded about 2 years ago when Henry had a new book and an exhibition at the Grolier Club in New York, both called A Conversation Larger Than the Universe, Readings in Science Fiction and the Fantastic, 1762 to 2017. They were both based on Henry's collection of aforementioned literature. It was really a wonderful exhibition and book, and really wound up opening doors to a bunch of other podcasts and pals. And there'll be a link to the book in the show notes. Henry's also the last person I talked to in a social, non-podcast setting, as we'll talk about in a moment. Now, as caveats go, not much. His mic setup was fine. There were no kids or barking dogs on either of our channels. Here's me and Henry. You were the last community thing that I was exposed to March 7th at the Antiquarian Book Fair. I had one more podcast up by the George Washington Bridge after that. I have not been around more than 3 people and more than one person now for a couple of weeks.
What a month it has been.
Yeah. How have you coped? How's the past month gone for you?
Well, it is almost to the day a month since we saw each other. We were right in the middle of the New York Book Fair, which was successful, jam-packed, and in hindsight, your prudence when you attended was visionary.
I wore gloves. I refused to shake hands. That was it.
Well, very sensible. I did a Q&A at one of the showings of the Booksellers documentary on Sunday evening and went home to New Jersey, where pretty much since then I have been at home. I made one really early trip into New York City driving to go to the shop and pick up a large box containing the blueprints of the World Trade Center towers to deliver to a downtown building, as those had been sold during the course of the book fair. And then I skedaddled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember seeing that you'd posted that somewhere on Twitter or Instagram or something, yes. And I thought, he's going into the city after all this. But
it was at 5:30 in the morning and no human interaction to speak of, except already social distancing at that point. Mm-hmm. And so I've been at home in New Jersey and fortunate enough to have some woods to go walking in to see the progress of spring and the first signs of skunk cabbage and other woodland joys. Mm-hmm. And I've been reading and working remotely and doing a little bit of cooking, sort of on the Raymond Queneau exercice de style version. Constant reiterations of similar ingredients and doing familiar vegetarian recipes or vegan recipes until something new happens.
One ingredient you wish you had that you didn't pick up before all this started?
One could never have enough gin, but the exotic citrus. Mm-hmm. No, we're fortunate. I have a well-stocked cabinet and lots of good, interesting varieties of beans.
Yeah. I just figured there had to be one thing you were thinking, oh man, I wish we had X.
No, I'm really glad that I have yeast, though, because I've been baking some bread using the James Beard cookbook from the 70s. That's a childhood book.
Yeah, I read
Beard on bread.
Somebody on Twitter was concerned that 100 years from now, another pandemic is going to start from all of these descendants opening the sourdough starters that people created during this pandemic.
I don't know whether they've opened any sourdough starters in the Egyptian tombs. I think it takes a little bit more constant care than neglect. Yeah. I just use yeast. I haven't gone the sourdough route yet. I've been reading a lot too, as one would.
Well, it varies. I've talked about it in some of the past ones that I've had trouble focusing on reading, although I'm getting more in the groove now. Did you find any sort of disruption like that, or were you pretty easy?
No, I've never had any trouble reading, but you know that. I have been doing as much rereading as reading new material, and that ranges from Avram Davidson. I reread The Adventures of Dr. Esther Hazy for the first time in several years. That's a great collection. And I had a couple of the John D. MacDonald, Travis McGee novels. One I don't think I had read for 20 years. It was interesting, and to see a series character handled so well over so many years. And also, MacDonald was something of an environmentalist in the way it was understood in the 60s and 70s. And his portrait of Florida under assault from development is pretty intense. The new discovery, though, is A.J. Liebling. I had, for some reason, never gotten around to reading books recommended by friends of mine, including the late Bill Reese, who thought very highly of the Earl of Louisiana. My point of entry to Liebling was Between Meals, which is his account of life in Paris in the 20s and 50s. And having spent part of my childhood there in a Paris that is equally inaccessible, it was really interesting. It was also an introduction to gastronomy as an extreme sport. And every page of Liebling is studded with fun sentences and throwaway lines. The other book that was new to me that I read, and I'm still contemplating or trying to figure out how she did it, is Anna Kavan's Ice from 1967. It's an end-of-the-world book, and she does stuff with narration that is really, really interesting. I haven't quite figured that one out yet.
Something I've asked a few of the SF and F people I've had on for this series, any dystopia / pandemic fiction you've read in the past sort of prepare you for what this has been like?
Well, I did have an entire chapter on the invention of the end of the world by Mary Shelley in A Conversation Larger Than the Universe. The Last Man is that'll help. It's that one I liked, and then curiously there's a Judge Dee novel that it's not it's fantastical enough because it's about 7th century China, but it's about a plague in Beijing and murder during that, and the continuance of public authority in times of crisis. That was interesting to see, perhaps by counterexample to what we're seeing sometimes now.
The thing that I wondered, do they capture the monotony of what we're experiencing as opposed to the, any sort of heroic or doomed vibe, just the static sense of, well, staying at home for another day, just that sort of endless, we'll say tedium.
It's one of the shorter, what's it called? It's called The Willow Pattern by Robert H. Van Gulik. It's a concise novel, so there's not too much about the tedium. But yes, I do remember in Mary Shelley that the progress of the reports of the plague and the growing sense that one is not going to escape it.
You mentioned being able to work at home. Has there been any sort of immediate takeaway in terms of the antiquarian?
Well, the rare book world is somewhat counter-cyclical, actually, as is everything that writers and booksellers and collectors and librarians do, because perspective is everything for us. But I am in the midst of launching the biggest professional project in my career with James Cummins Bookseller. I am bringing to sale and market the library and collections of Ricky Jay, the stage performer and magician and scholar and writer, fascinating man, a fascinating collection of visual material, books from the 15th century to the present, and his papers. And the initial response from institutions is indicative of how people respond to the world, night and day. One institution said an acquisition is unthinkable, while another said, this is a profound opportunity. Even in these difficult times, I'm going to do everything I can in my institution to seek funding.
Wow. Yeah, he was on my Mount Rushmore list of people I wanted to record with, and I never even had an angle to approach him. And
I knew him cordially, but not intimately, for many years. I think I might have sold him one item in his vast collection of some 12,000 items. So not that, but what a man! And he knew his collection, and he left a really detailed catalog record of his material and all of the work that he did with the collection, exhibitions, books, consulting on films, fascinating character. And I'm very excited to have this project to be working on.
Yeah, what's the timeline for it? Or is it simply in process? And
it is in progress. I don't expect an immediate sale. Nobody's making decisions of that magnitude on the spur of the moment, but the conversations are beginning.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I could see the stuff.
That's the aim, to get it somewhere where the future exhibitions and scholarship that will come out of it will continue to show how interesting.
They did an exhibition when he was still alive.
Oh, right? Lots.
No, I mean very recently in New York.
Bookinger and Spirit Photography at the Met, two major exhibitions.
Yeah. I remember there was one somewhat recent, within the last 2 or 3 years there.
That's fascinating. That's about the German calligrapher and performer who was born without what we would call fingers.
Yes.
But did microcalligraphy and traveled all around Europe and fathered many, many children and so on.
Yeah. Which, again, people knew how to live.
But the thing that is really rewarding about this, instead of going on the bus, Gil, I get to walk in the woods for an hour a day.
Yeah.
And that is deeply restorative.
You know my fixation on the Peregrine, that J.A. Baker book. I assume you know my fixation on the Peregrine. Maybe you don't.
Well, now I do.
Oh gosh,
I was an ornithologist when I was 7 or 8 years old, so I might have read some of those books too.
Oh yeah, get the Peregrine. So that is the only. When I go to the Antiquarian Book Fair now, the only things I look for, because I know I'll never find them, are a signed first of the Peregrine and maybe a Philip Roth one or two, but not the ones that they tend to have on display. So that keeps me from spending the money that I would really regret, but not regret spending at the book fair. I haven't been spending.
It's hard not to post on Twitter once in a while, but really, I haven't been spending much time doing that stuff. I've been trying to write letters or emails to people to catch up, and make some phone calls. And the one online thing that I have been looking at regularly, besides the COVID tracker website, is Chris Brown's Field Notes, which is a fascinating new series of reflections on natural history and walking around the edgelands in his part of the world.
Mm-hmm. And I have to thank you for introducing us at that panel you did for the Grolier Club when your exhibition was going on, because Chris has been, again, one of those people I look at. I'm like, I never would have encountered this person without the podcast and the huge network of people, but I'm so thankful that I have that in my life. The field notes are similar to some of the Peregrine, the Baker book, by the way, which Chris and I are both devotees of.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm supposed to get him on sometime.
Hey, I also really enjoyed the Ben Catcher dairy restaurant book. I mean, that was a fun podcast you did, and how amazing that somebody should write the history of the world in order to tell about a Jewish dining culture.
I swear to God, for years he'd mentioned this. I didn't even understand what form the book would have, what he actually meant he was doing. And then when it showed up, I'm like, only Ben.
Yeah.
Only Ben would do this to tell the story of kosher dairy restaurants. But, it's a joy, but a very, very strange one.
Yeah.
Other long-term reading projects, now that we're thinking really long-term in terms of
well, yes, I've decided to read the books of Charles C. Abbott, late 19th century New Jersey natural history writer or nature writer and archaeologist. He wrote a book, a monograph in the 1870s on the Stone Age in New Jersey, and lots of books about walking around in his backyard, wasteland wanderings, upland meadows. I can't ever get there. But I wouldn't mind. I don't mind walking around in his books, reading about the woodlands of the 1880s.
Mm-hmm. Was he our particular area?
Actually, mostly South Jersey or Trenton. Okay. But that's I'm only just dipping into that pile of books.
Mm-hmm. And
I am working on a couple of editing projects privately, and a short story that I want to finish sometime soon, but that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah. Do you find yourself, we'll say, more productive? Do you find yourself getting more done in this environment?
Define your terms, sir.
I mean, the reading sounds like you're keeping pace with the reading, but are you able to focus more on certain projects like this?
Oh.
Are there things that you wouldn't have gotten to if you weren't definitely staying home every day?
Oh, yeah. Yes. And some of the private editorial projects are related to that. And so it is nice to have a good, quiet place to work and good health. And so I'm incredibly lucky and conscious of feeling that way.
Mm-hmm. Your take on the odds of you and me getting together at ReaderCon?
Honestly, I doubt it. Alas.
Yeah. Same here. We'll maybe see each other in Montclair, but do you have a place that you would want to go that you're missing immensely because of the inability to get out? Besides walking in the woods,
I miss my local bar in New York.
Yeah. Which bar is that?
I'll tell you offline.
Oh, okay. No worries.
It's not a secret, but it's well kept secret.
Understood. Yeah, there's a degree of people just have this one thing. For me, the thing I miss is just doing this face to face with somebody.
Sure.
But, I'm sure there's a restaurant or something I could come up with otherwise, but really,
But it is interesting on the working remotely that there's something to be said to be able to stand up and poke one's head around the wall and ask a colleague, what do you think about this? Instead of having to, figure out an email or send, make a phone call. And the collegiality of the bookshop is something that is difficult to recreate at a distance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I've been working out of home since the beginning of 2014. So this is my steady state, but at the same time, I schedule calls and do things where
you do a lot face to face, don't you?
I haven't had to, like, I could get away for, even before this stuff hit, I could do a lot of stuff from home, but we would have trade shows in the spring and the fall.
Right.
I'd go down to DC periodically. You know, my lobbyists down there take care of all the major work, but, you know, it's just weird.
There's some things that are simply easier to do in person. A telephone call is better than an email, but sometimes just being able to see somebody is a good thing.
Yeah, because schmoozing is my superpower. So it'd make a very bad episode or issue of the X-Men, but yeah, that was my mutant powers, the schmooze.
One of the great lines from A.J. Liebling that I wish I had known when I was 25 is often alone, but seldom lonely.
That's a
good thing to think about right now, because it is actually our connections and our abilities to communicate to others that alleviates the solitude, enforced or elective.
Yeah. Do you find yourself, you mentioned reaching out to people more and writing letters. Are you more in touch with, say, old friends or old acquaintances through this than you had been recently?
It's random, and it's sort of, oh yes, why not write that person? I could always be a better correspondent, and I try.
Yeah, that's what I wonder. If you find yourself working harder at that this last month or so.
No, I've initiated a few contacts or correspondences that might have lapsed, but no, I'm not. I don't have a regular weekly routine.
Understood. Last question: book coming out later this year that you're pining for?
Well, my late friend Carol Rothkopf's son, David Rothkopf, has a book. I don't know the exact title yet because I've only seen a picture of the galley proofs, but T for Traitor. I think it is a history of treason in America from Benjamin Arnold to the present.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Especially with what treason is coming to mean nowadays.
Yes. No, I mean, usually the books that I am thinking about are old books. But
I know, but you still have books that you look for.
I really enjoyed also reading Joanne McNeil's book, Lurking, a sort of social history or personal history of the internet. She's a generation younger than me, and it's interesting to see how someone grew up with it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a degree, like the parents who I talk to, parents who are our age, how they explain to their kids what it was like before.
Yeah, there was a good one pager in the New Yorker about that. Obviously written by a young person.
Yeah, they just don't really know. The Rothkopf book, by the way, is Traitor. I just looked it up because we have the internet in front of us at all times. So, so cool. I actually make a note because it looks like a really good book. I'm going to check that out myself. So,
yes.
So yeah, if you could sneak me any pictures of the Ricky Jay stuff, I'll pay you when we're finally able to go face to face again.
I will figure out what is possible to. There's a lot of visual resources, but it's chiefly directed at prospective buyers at this point.
Oh, of course. And I've got a little part of my bookshelf. In fact, maybe that's the installment of the bookshelfies that I've been putting in my emails. I'll use the one with the Ricky Jay books for this week.
Well, I can certainly recommend or even lend you extraordinary. Extraordinary Exhibitions. One of his collections of sort of posters and show bills. And then the book on dice was a lot of fun with photographs by Rosamund Purcell.
Yeah, I've got that on the shelf here.
Yeah.
Along with Jay's Journal of Curiosities and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So
good to dip into.
Yeah.
And
like I say, that's
what's on your shelf right now? Since I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh, I
new
spent a
or
month.
Old?
Oh, I'm about 50 pages from finishing Matt Ruff's new book, 88 Names, which is just compulsively readable, and I was just too weirdly inert yesterday to blow through the last half of it. I thought
that sounds fun. I get my new books through our local bookshop, Watch on Booksellers, and they sort of take the orders, and you can drive by and pick it up from the back table.
Yeah. I've held off on ordering anything. I mean, that one I got because Matt and I are going to record one of these, but I figure there are 2,500 or so books here, many of which I have not gotten to yet.
I forgot to get the Richard Kadri's book, The Grand Dark, when I could have, so I got to order that.
That's a lot of fun. Yeah. Even it's actually, I don't want to say weirdly fitting, but it does have a post-plague, post-war, interwar thing going on. So talking to Richard about that this weekend in terms of that same question about what literature kind of prepares you for this sort of dystopia was kind of neat. So, but yeah, The Grand Dark's gonna be a lot of fun when you get to that one.
Yep. So,
cool. All right, I will let you go because it's a beautiful day out, and I should actually get out and do a little walking in the woods myself. Last thing you'd want to tell listeners or people 100 years in the future who are discovering what podcasts used to be?
Every time you walk in the woods, it's a different walk. It's not new with me, but...
We'll talk soon, Henry. Okay. Thanks so much for the time, man.
Sure.
That was Henry Wessells. Go check out his website, endlessbookshelf.net, to learn more about him and to check out his writing, editing projects, literary collection, book dealing livelihood, and vegetarian cooking, and all sorts of other stuff. And that's endlessbookshelf.net. So Endless Bookshelf, no space, exactly as it sounds. He's also on Twitter as endless_bookshelf, the latter of which is BKSHELF. There's a feed for his Twitter on his website, so you can see the spelling and go to it from there. And make sure you check out A Conversation Larger Than the Universe, Readings in Science Fiction and the Fantastic, 1762 to 2017, if you have any interest in science fiction and fantasy literature. It's a wonderful book, and there's a link to it in the show notes for this episode. And we'll be back tomorrow with another COVID check-in. If you want to send me a little update to read on the air or have something you want to share with the listeners, let me know and we'll set something up. I'm at groth18, GROTH18, @gmail.com. You can find contact info at our sites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. And you can find all of the COVID-19 sessions at chimeraobscura.com/VM. There's a menu bar item that says the COVID-19 sessions. I'm putting these out daily as long as that'll last. I've got about 30 guests who have confirmed that they're interested in doing these, so as long as I can, we'll keep going. In case you're interested in how I'm recording these as opposed to the in-person ones I normally do, I'm using a system or a program called Zencastr to record these remotes. It's ZENCASTR, so no final E, just Zencastr.com. The service costs $20 a month, but my Patreon supporters more than cover it, especially since I'm no longer spending money on tolls, parking, coffee, subway rides, etc. for all of those in-person episodes. If you can spare any money, don't give it to me. I'm doing just fine. Go find the Patreons, Kickstarters, Indiegogos, GoFundMes, tip jars, whatever crowdfunding sources are out there for the artists, writers, and other people in your world who need help. If you can spare it for them. I'm Gil Roth. This is Tuesday, April 7th, 2020, and this is a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Keep the conversation going, stay safe, and wash your damn hands.